we get in this mindset where it's like, I'll train to do something and I'll do it for the rest of my life. But why does that have to be the case? Giving yourself permission to pay attention to what's going on in your own body, in your own mind, to note that down, to notice trends, to notice the things that drain you, the things that energize you, because that's all hugely valuable information. That just encapsulates like the question that I finally got around to asking myself, and that so many of us would benefit from asking.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I am delighted to bring to you a very multi-talented human who I love dearly. Her name is Dr. Joanna Cranston, and she is a former Army active duty, so she's not a veteran, general surgeon, who has now pivoted, and she is leaning into her artistic side, even though surgery is very artistic. So we'll hear more how that came together. And she has created a company. It's called Word of Hope Designs. And we're going to be talking about more about her story and how it led to where she's at today. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat with you.
Me too. So of course, we have a wonderful piece behind me. You can see it better on the website, which we will have in the description below. But for people who haven't met you yet, or people that may not know your story, can you share some of that with us today?
Yeah, sure. What I do now is create hand-lettered art with messages of hope. That's kind of how I encapsulate what I do at Words of Hope Designs. What you have on your wall is an example, but basically how I got started doing that was just as like a way of feeding my own soul. I've always been a very creative person, but then at some point kind of internalized the message that creativity and like being artistic, that wasn't really a way to, change the world or anything. And so, I went to a academically selective high school. My dad was a physician and had always told me, you would make a good doctor. And so as I went into college, I was really kind of undecided because I knew I loved writing. I did love art. Despite my high school being very like math and science intensive, I was in the art club. I actually did kind of embrace my creative side to some extent in high school. I just always saw it as like a lesser than thing. And so as I was trying to figure out what to major in, I did a lot of soul searching. And I mean, my first year I had already like completed all the English requirements, so I couldn't take an English class, but I took art, Spanish, and then biology too, because I was like, well, I really enjoyed that in high school. And so I just really tried to decide, like, what do I want to spend my life doing? But I think looking back, and I know this sounds like a lot of build up to it, but I really reflected on kind of what led me down the path that I took. My ultimate desire was like to be useful to society, right? So I'm a Christian, and my relationship with God has always been a big part of my life. And so my question was like, how can God use me the most? And I wish, looking back, I wish I had kind of asked the question of like, how can I really discover the gifts God made me and how I can enjoy using them and sharing them with the world. But at the time it was like, how can I be useful? And so I decided I should be pre-med. And my thinking was kind of, if I can do this, if I'm smart enough and dedicated enough and disciplined enough, then I should. And so I headed down that road, and I wanted to be able to do some sort of humanitarian or mission work in the future. And that was a big driving factor in what led me to join the Army, because I didn't want to have hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt when I got out of med school. I also was, excited to serve my country. The recruiters made it sound like a great idea, of course. And so I joined the Army just before starting med school. And then as I got into my clinical rotations, again, it's funny how you see things in retrospect versus at the time. Like at the time, all I knew was surgery is different from any other specialty. I get to use my hands. I get to go in there and fix things. And that is just so satisfying. And in retrospect, like all that is still true. I've come to realize that I am a maker, like of course, I'm only going to be happy when I'm like doing stuff with my hands, that kinesthetic skill of surgery. And also I have a lot of ADHD tendencies. And so of course I would not have been happy about standing around for hours on rounds talking about how to tweak medications. Right. And so despite knowing that it would be very challenging, I felt like surgery was really the only thing that I would be happy with as a specialty. And so I became a general surgeon. I later went on to do a fellowship in burn surgery. Not so much because I was like super passionate about burns. It just kind of worked out with the needs of the Army. I didn't accrue an extra obligation. It's the only fellowship where you can get extra training without incurring an extra obligation. And so I did burn surgery for a while as well. But then I came to the point where this was in 2019 into 2020. I was getting ready to complete my military obligation. My time was kind of winding down. I had decided pretty much since the beginning that I wasn't going to stay in for 20 years. My plan was always to get out. And so I started looking for civilian general surgeon jobs. And as it turned out, I had one more deployment I had to go on. And so a lot of my job search was while I was deployed in Afghanistan. And so like trying to coordinate calls with, the time differences was fun. But anyway, at the same time, it's like things were happening within my own heart and brain that would like leading me to realize I probably didn't actually want to do this for the rest of my life. But that was just such a scary idea. I don't think I even let myself like have that realization. Like it was back there, but I was still pursuing, made my list of practices that I thought would be the best fit. Interviewed at one place twice. They seemed to like me. I seemed to like them. And then I didn't get offered that job. And that was kind of the turning point where I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm back to the drawing board. But wait a second, do I really want to do this? And I had some coaching along the way, not specifically for my career, but it had come up as well, where one of the things the coach had said, she's a physician, but also a coach. And she was like, we have this, we get in this mindset where it's like, I'll train to do something and I'll do it for the rest of my life. But why does that have to be the case? And a quote that I've come across since then is by Emily P. Freeman, who has a podcast I love, but she said, just because you're good at something doesn't mean you have to do it forever. Mm-hmm. And so what I knew at the time was, there are many moving pieces in my story as well. So by this time, I was also a single mom of 3, having left an abusive marriage. And raising 3 neurodivergent children, which has a lot of challenges of its own. And so it was just kind of like I had my head down going in this one direction for so long. And then this gave me a chance to look up and be like, what are my actual priorities here? My kids, my own mental health. And I mean, I don't know. I think things have changed since when I first started down this road. And so maybe my own plans should change too. So that was kind of the background for what led me to eventually forming Words of Hope Designs.
And I can't wait to talk more about that. And I'm thinking many will share that internal feeling that I feel like I'm on the path that's not meant for me. When you were at the point where you were feeling like, I don't know if I'm going down the path that I really want, what were you experiencing? How did you kind of come to that?
I wouldn't have recognized even exactly what the struggle was. What I was experiencing was anxiety and feeling like a failure. So I think that's important to say out loud, because I'm sure there are others out there feeling, because it was like, I've done all these things, I've checked the boxes, always just kind of feeling like hard work and taking the next step would be the key to happiness. And so if I'm not happy, clearly there's something wrong with me, right? So that's it's only been maybe in the last 6 months that I could even look back and say, like, that's what was going on. At the time, it just feels like a lot of unrest. And I didn't know exactly why, because you don't have a full picture of what it's going to look like down the road. So at the time, you're just like, I must be crazy. I am failing at this. And I don't even want to talk to people about it because no one's going to understand.
That's so fascinating too, because it parallels like that. Those are my exact thoughts. And yet here we are under like, exactly. When I was in oral surgery in the Air Force, I thought I should be happy now. I pushed everyone away to get to this goal. And once I achieved it, or once I was in the training I thought would make me feel content, and it wasn't creating the value in my life, or it was even going against the values of being present for ones we loved. And then you're lost, like disillusion. And then there's that sunk cost fallacy that's like, well, I've gotten here, and I tried to make fit. When I was in dental school, actually, you would probably have rocked dental school. It's very technically inclined. I had friends who were artists, and they just created really great teeth. So not that you should consider that, but you just always felt like it was in the wrong place, and then it makes you feel like a failure. And then I was just in a meeting with Dr. Michelle Chestovich last night about self-compassion, determining our success markers or our goals based on how hard they were, because that hard work is what gets you to success, and the people the hardest. I'm like, oh, we're the ones that are burnt out and isolated and using substances to numb because it's exhausting. So for anyone that hears this and also thinks, oh my God, I'm a failure because I'm alone. It took me 5 years to even say anything because of that shame and guilt of leaving surgery and then getting medically discharged from the military and told I wasn't fit enough. Because I got, boy, did that feed into the lack of worthiness or feeling not enough.
Yeah, for sure. The concept of picking worthy goals based on how hard they are, that's something that I've really thought a lot about, because now that I'm a mom, obviously I want to instill in my kids the value of hard work, right? But I think it's a slippery slope. And that is, I don't know if it was specifically our generation that was, I don't know, or if it's something that's still going on today. But to me, it was like hard work and striving to do hard things was like elevated way above where it should have been. And like the concept of embracing the things that you're naturally good at, like that wasn't really talked about as much. And so I totally, like, if I was naturally good at something, I was like, no way am I gonna like spend my life doing that, because it's not a challenge, right? And so I think there has to be some balance between, yes, you want to push yourself, you want to be the best you can be, but we're also like created with specific gifts and things that bring us joy, and like there's nothing wrong with that. Like we should go towards that too. So I think, I mean, that's just something that I've learned that I want to try to get right with my kids. Is hard work is important, but it's not the most important thing.
I reflect back, and there's so much grief about like looking back at that time period when we were deciding. I don't know if you feel this too, but I'm like, man, I just want to have compassion and just wish that I had leaned into the things that now, years later, we're learning. But of course, we can add that value to what we're creating now. And you said you're a maker. I'd love for you to share the schedule that you showed me with the maker versus the manager schedule. So definitely.
Oh yeah, I mean that was so let's step back to kind of thinking about my job, that like my last time I worked as a surgeon, because I've thought many times about how like I actually like loved the people I worked with. I liked my patients. You know, I really enjoyed helping my patients solve the problems that they came to me to solve. And so it was kind of like, well, what's there not to love about this? And so I kind of dissected that. And one of the things that really bothered me, and seemed like silly that it bothered me, but it would be like, I sit down at my desk and look at the list of things I want to get done today, for example. And so say one of them is writing an email. So I'll start writing the email, and then 2 seconds later, like the nurse is knocking on my door to let me know that she's roomed a patient. And then I go to see that patient. And it's just like the common theme of what was driving me crazy, and I felt guilty about because I felt like it shouldn't be driving me crazy, but was that I never had just like a block of time to get stuff done. And my brain can't just switch from task to task super fast, right? And so when I heard about this concept of like a maker's schedule versus a manager's schedule, it resonated so much. So the idea is that a manager's schedule is one that is set by a manager. So it's like hourly blocks, and you might have a meeting at 1 o'clock and then a free hour and then another meeting at 3 o'clock. And, you know, but the way that makers' brains, and I don't want to overgeneralize, but in general work, is that you can't get into that deep creative work, one, if you only have 20 minutes, or two, if you just know that that meeting is looming, even if it's hours later. And so, I mean, now that I have kind of left the workplace where I have no choice but to be on a manager's schedule, in some ways it's been really freeing. In some ways it's been a whole new challenge, because you still have to have some sort of like structure and goals of stuff you want to get done. But I am trying to embrace that, like just the maker mindset. One tip I heard that's been helpful is like, just maybe make like one of your mornings, this is going to be a morning when I have creative time, you know, and like not from 9 to 11, just like this morning is. And then if you happen to get some other stuff done, great. But that way, like, you know what your focus is, and it's not rushed by knowing something's scheduled right after it. So just even the knowledge that two types of mindsets for schedules exist has been freeing to me, because then you're not feeling like you're just crazy or needy or don't function well. No, you function well, just differently.
Yeah, differently. And you think different. And one thing, going back to surgery, is clinic to me was very hard. It was very emotionally and energetically exhausting. And but then the OR I loved. So that's why I always thought I'd love to be a surgeon, because I loved the OR. It was quiet and you could focus and you could work. But then there was call, and then there was all the other things. So if I could pick and choose and create. But yeah.
I would say that OR time when you're actually like doing the case and you're in the flow and you have all the supplies you need, but what it like is, sure, you can get in that flow state and it can be very zen, but most of the time it's not that way. It's like going to check, is my patient in the room yet? Nope, 20 more minutes. Okay. And then you get there and like oh, we're out of such and such, we have to go find it. And so even that time, unfortunately, was not like the flow state that I would have liked it to be.
Yeah, I had a hard time when we're told we're going to go at a certain time and we get bumped for red traumas, and then you're waiting up all night, and then we didn't have post call, so then you're in clinic the next day and can't remember your name. But speaking when you're in a mindset that might be more challenging to think rationally or think positively, I understand your words of hope affirmation came from that mindset of how to be there for your future self. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
The hand lettering that is involved in a lot of the art I create. I started doing that maybe 5 years or so before I founded Words of Hope Designs. I honestly don't even remember where I saw it first, but handwriting has always been just kind of fascinating to me. Like I was the kid that would always doodle in the margins of my notes, make different fonts with my own handwriting and all this stuff. Something about that connection between the brain and the hand would really cement stuff in my mind more than just typing or saying it out loud. So even in med school, that was my primary way of studying, was writing things out multiple times. But anyway, so when I learned about the practice of hand lettering, I was like, oh, that sounds like it might be up my alley. And so when a lot of trauma just started going on in my personal life, and for years, because this was during my training, I had just pushed aside any sort of creative pursuits. I just don't have time for that. But it was when my life really kind of started falling apart, I was like, you know what? I'm going to lean back into this thing that makes me feel like myself. I'm going to specifically hand letter messages that I want to remember. One, so that that's what I'm thinking about while I'm creating the art. And then two, so then I have the reminders up. Because I found that during the trauma I was experiencing, there would be moments of clarity and then a lot of moments of confusion and forgetting those things I knew to be true. And so having these reminders of messages that I knew to be true, and I wanted to remember that they were true in the times of stress, was really helpful. And so after doing that for a while and just finding how much peace it brought me, that became the seed of the idea for Words of Hope Designs. Both the art itself and then the process of teaching people how to do this could be a real gift to share with the world.
I think that's amazing. And I will share that I got a piece of that at the ACE conference where I really enjoyed your speaking, but we'll show them some example, of course, of my wonderful attempts. You don't have to be perfect.
Oh, very good.
Hand lettering. But to your point of even, I'm not really one that can color very long, but hand lettering, it's different because you're, and then you can start writing messages and things like that. And it's more getting back into touch with your whole body. I think especially if you're kind of trying to calm the nervous system during traumatic times. I personally, in the group around me, it was so healing, and we were getting into our Zen state, and there's healing elements to that. So I highly recommend. And can people get in touch with you for leading events, workshops like that?
Yes, definitely. We can share my website, but it's just wordsofhopedesigns.com. And there's a link on there to get in touch with me. But I'm also just barely starting, but getting my YouTube channel out there, which is going to be teaching hand lettering. So,
oh, wow. Amazing. Cool. Yeah. And of course, I've seen you're on Instagram, so everyone needs to go follow it. We'll put all the links down below, but I've seen your amazing ornaments, and you crafted one that I recommended.
Oh, yeah.
So can you share a little bit more about the kind of art that you're creating as well?
Most of it so far has involved hand lettering, but then there's the background of the pieces. So that's been either watercolors or alcohol inks, that's what's on the one hanging up behind you there. But one of the things that I've learned about the process of being an artist is part of the process is actually figuring out what your highest work is. That's a term I was introduced to, but just basically what the the gist of what you're doing is. And so I feel like that's what a lot of this year has been. And I've tried to not completely just be all over the place with what I'm doing, but have my like core values. And so staying within those, kind of exploring different, yes, making ornaments at Christmas time. I've done a lot of commission work of like quotes that are important to people, or even working with them on the image that goes with the quote. I'm developing greeting cards and notebooks that I'm going to be having in my shop later this year. But in some ways, this year has been a lot about finding my style and experimenting and finding what's going to be the direction I go more in the future.
I think this is such an important message here, because often in society, we're told that we have to stay linear, one path, or else like our CV has to make sense. And I find that after you're reinventing, like leaning more into your authentic self or leaning into something, there's a necessary amount of investigating, being multi-passionate to really figure out what sticks again. And I find it would be a complete disservice to be like, well, I'm going to do that next. And I've actually been pushed to decide my next career and to write it down and have it all detailed. And I resist because I've done that before, and it brings me panic because I'm like, I don't have clarity on that. And I'm doing multiple different things. And it feels in the beginning like, oh my God, people are going to judge me because I'm all over the place. But then if we give ourselves permission to be multi-passionate and to explore, because it's so important for understanding yourself. And I love how you said you've got your core values, because those are the two things I'd say when you're trying to find yourself and reground yourself, is trying to identify what is in alignment with your core values and then taking the next best step. What would be your recommendation as the next best step for someone that's starting to feel a little bit out of alignment and considering a different path?
Ooh, that's a good question. Okay, so here's what I would say. Personally, and I think I suspect this is true of a lot of other, especially women in medicine. One of the messages that we tend to internalize over time is that our internal worlds don't matter. Like what's going on, take myself for example. So in surgery, you're taught like, eat when you can, pee when you can, sleep when you can, and don't mess with the pancreas. But that's aside from the point. But so basically, like, your personal needs, your personal desires don't matter. You're here to do surgery, fix patients. Everything comes before your needs, and not just needs, but even your opinions on things. And so I think that is a huge problem, because our internal worlds have so much information to give us. And so, but even as I've like tried to embrace that, I meet so much resistance within myself of like, well, journaling is a waste of time because nobody's going to see it, and who cares, and it's not productive, and I can't check it off my to-do list. And guess what? That's not true. It gives me so much information. And so I would say just like giving yourself permission to pay attention to what's going on in your own body, in your own mind, to note that down, to notice trends, to notice the things that drain you, the things that energize you, because that's all hugely valuable information. And I think that's one of the things that breaks my heart about the way that people are trained to become doctors. Just like, that's all completely trained out of us. Like, that doesn't matter. But yes, it does matter so much.
And this is where I feel that what's trained out of us also is the creativity. When I was in med school, I used to act, and I tried to go to acting lessons, and I like had no creative juices left. And then when I started to heal again, people don't realize how much leaning into your creativity can help. Burnout can help you with self-confidence, can help you with self-doubt. And I, sometimes we hear about play, but just allowing yourself to expand and not limit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And of course we've got what this one says here, right? The world needs your voice. for anyone that isn't able to read it, parents.
Yeah.
And even this was gifted to me in the ACE, and it was because I often, when we start sharing vulnerably, I'm like, oh my gosh, am I too much?
Nobody's gonna want to hear what I have to say. Like, and I think part of that is like we're trained to believe there's only one right answer to questions. There's only one right way to do things. Some of that is, I mean, it's necessary just in order to train a large group of people how to do something. But I think it is really harmful because then, yeah, there's no incentive to try to think of better ways to do things because, oh no, it's already been figured out. Nobody's going to want to hear a dissenting opinion. So, yeah, just kind of undoing some of that conditioning, paying attention to yourself.
Yeah, I think exploring where that belief comes from. Like, why? I have to do this. Why? We don't often stop. Like, I knew for me when I wanted to be a surgeon, I wanted people not to know I'm super sensitive because that was seen as a weakness, and I internalized that as a weakness or a gift for people that in this world need someone to hold space for them.
Yeah. I think for me, I mean, in some ways I had a similar experience, only it wasn't so much intentionally saying, I'm going to go down this path and maybe people won't notice my sensitivity but my attitude was more like, you know, I know the stereotypical surgeon is this way, but you don't have to be that way to be a surgeon. And so I'm going to like be the change, right? Which is good. Like that's a good mindset in some ways. On the other hand, I saw I think it was an Adam Grant quote recently that was like, you're far more likely to be changed by your workplace than to change it. Now, you know, there's two sides because if nobody ever tries to change bad environments, then they will never change. On the other hand, that made it really hard for me when, for a multitude of reasons, I decided it was the best choice was to step away and do something else. But this little voice in my head is like, oh, but you were supposed to change it. You were supposed to fix it. And so I think that it's just important to be aware of that and realize that like we as individuals are not the saviors for a broken system at the expense of our own health. Mm-hmm. That's not our responsibility. In some ways, I think that held me in an unhealthy place for a while.
Yeah, and that goes to so many different levels, right? We stay in things because we want to be the change. We're fixers. We're healers. Mm-hmm. We're going to change the things, that then to what cost?
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, there's nuances, right? So you can change some things and you should fight to change those things, but there's, costs to everything. And so you have to weigh the cost as well. I don't have the answer, but
if you do, make sure to drop that in the comments. Are there any last words you'd like to leave with the audience?
Actually, I did write down 2 quotes that I was going to share and never got around to. So one was from I know you have your Brene Brown cup. It was from actually Brene Brown podcast where she was interviewing Amy Cuddy. She wrote the book Presence, and which has been really impactful for me. But anyway, Amy Cuddy was talking to Brene Brown at one point about whether she should go up for tenure. And Brene Brown was like, it's not a question. You shouldn't be asking like whether you're going to get it, but whether that's what you want. And so anyway, she said, it's not whether you'll get to the top of the ladder, it's whether your ladder is up against the right building. And so I think that just encapsulates like the question that I finally got around to asking myself, and that so many of us would benefit from asking. Sure, you can keep working and taking each next step, but just make sure that ladder is up against the right building. And then the other one is a quote by Howard Thurman, who said, "Don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive and go do it. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive."
Love it. Just marinate that for a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here and sharing your story and your wisdom.
Thank you.
Of course, we will make sure that they get into touch. And of course, I love this on the back, but we'll put the information in the description down below.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And they all need to go over to your YouTube channel and subscribe.
For sure.
Thanks everyone for being here.